My name is Emma, and I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. I've always considered myself a rational, level-headed person. My boyfriend Alex and I had been together for 2 years, living together for 6 months. I'm a resident doctor, currently in the grueling intern year of my residency, pulling exhausting night shifts that leave me feeling like a zombie most days. Alex works as a software engineer, keeping regular daytime hours. Because of our opposing schedules, we've barely seen each other lately, let alone had quality time. Still, I loved him, or at least I thought I did. It started as little things. A cupboard door falling off, leaving me with a bruised temple. A piece of furniture mysteriously shifted, causing me to slam my shin in the dark. Alex always shook his head, chuckling as he told me I needed to be more careful. I tried to brush it off. After all, I was sleep-deprived, constantly rushing around, and maybe I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings. But something about his demeanor when he said it made me pause. I didn't want to be paranoid. He wasn't abusive. We had arguments, sure, but they were usually about petty things like dishes or forgotten chores, and he always apologized afterward, sounding genuinely sorry. But then there was the cabinet. When I tried to reattach it, the screws in the hinge were nowhere to be found. Later, while digging through Alex's drawer to grab a pair of socks, I found them there, along with a screwdriver. I stared at them for a long time. Why would he put them there? It made no sense. I told myself it was just absent-mindedness on his part. Maybe he was doing some unrelated project and put them there without thinking. But the unease in my gut wouldn't go away. I started noticing other oddities around the apartment. The bed was suddenly closer to the wall, narrowing the space I normally use to shuffle past. I hit my shin again that night, hissing in pain as I rubbed the bruise. Alex laughed it off the next morning, calling me clumsy, but something about the way he said it didn't sit right. It was the same tone he used when I told him about the cupboard door or the time I slipped on a wet patch in the bathroom. The shower head was the final straw. I had just stepped under the water, letting the hot steam work out the knots in my shoulders, when the entire head detached, striking me on the back of the skull. I stumbled, slipping on the wet tiles and clutched at the wall to keep from falling. When I finally managed to turn off the water and sit on the edge of the tub, I noticed the blood on my hands. It was a small cut, but it throbbed in time with my heartbeat. That was when I realized I wasn't being clumsy. This wasn't just bad luck or poor maintenance. Someone was sabotaging my home, and the only person who could have done it was Alex. I sat there in the bathroom, my mind racing. Why would Alex do this? We had our problems, sure, but they were normal problems. Arguments over chores, misunderstandings about each other's schedules. Nothing serious, nothing that would lead me to suspect he wanted to hurt me. But now, looking back on all the injuries, all the mysterious incidents, it started to form a pattern. My hands were shaking as I cleaned the cut on my scalp and pressed a towel against it to stop the bleeding. The sound of the water dripping from the detached shower head was deafening in the otherwise quiet apartment. I felt a rush of anger and confusion, but also a sickening sense of betrayal. I loved him. I trusted him. I thought about confronting him. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make him tell me why he'd done these things. But as I sat there, I realized how dangerous that might be. If he really had been setting traps, deliberately causing these accidents, how would he react if I called him out on it? I didn't know what he was capable of, and I wasn't about to find out the hard way. Instead, I decided to make a plan. I couldn't stay in the apartment any longer. It wasn't safe. I needed to leave, but I couldn't just pack my bags and walk out the door while he was home. I didn't want to risk another confrontation. I'd have to wait until he left for work and then get out as quickly as possible. As soon as he walked out the door the next morning, I called my best friend Sophie. She arrived within the hour, her face a mask of concern when she saw me. I hadn't told her everything over the phone, just that I needed to leave and I needed her help. When she saw the bandage on my head and the fear in my eyes, she didn't ask questions. She just started packing. We worked in silence for a while, the sound of boxes being taped and clothes being folded the only noise in the apartment. I was hyper-aware of every sound outside, every step in the hallway, worried Alex might come home early. My heart raced at the thought. What would I say? What would I do if he caught us? Just as we were finishing up, the door slammed open. Alex stood there, his face dark with anger. He didn't ask why we were packing. He didn't look sad or confused. He looked furious. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. I froze. Sophie stepped back, her phone in her hand. She had already dialed the police, ready to hit send. I turned to face him, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm leaving," I said. "I know what you've been doing, Alex, the cabinet, the bed, the shower head. I'm done." He laughed, but it wasn't the warm laugh I used to love. It was cold, sharp, and dismissive. "You're crazy," he said. "You've always been crazy. You think I'm trying to hurt you? That's insane." "Then why are the screws from the cabinet in your drawer?" I shot back. "Why was the bed moved? Why did the shower head come off?" He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. I looked at Sophie and said, "Call them now." She pressed the button, and I saw Alex's expression change. He took a step back, his hands raised slightly, as if to show he wasn't going to do anything, but his eyes were still burning with anger. 2 officers arrived quickly. They listened to my story, their faces growing more serious as I described everything that had happened. Alex continued to deny it, calling me delusional and accusing me of trying to ruin his life. But the officers weren't buying it. They stayed with us until I had finished packing, ensuring that I could leave safely. As I walked out the door, my heart was pounding. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if Alex would try to contact me again, or if he would try to deny everything and make me out to be the bad guy. But at that moment, all I cared about was getting away. I needed to protect myself. The drive to Sophie's house felt surreal. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind replaying the events over and over. I had left. I had finally left. But the fear still lingered. What if he came after me? What if he tried to find me? Sophie's voice broke through my thoughts. "You did the right thing, Emma. You're safe now." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed it yet. I needed time to process everything. But one thing was certain. I was done ignoring my instincts. I was done making excuses, and I was done living in fear. When we arrived at Sophie's house, she helped me carry in the boxes. I felt numb, my hands moving on autopilot as we set everything down in her spare room. The reality of what had happened, what could have happened, was slowly sinking in. Alex had deliberately put me in harm's way, and I had been living under the same roof as him, clueless until now. "You're staying here as long as you need," Sophie said firmly, her hand on my shoulder. "We'll figure out the next steps together." I nodded, grateful but still shaken. I sat on the edge of the guest bed staring down at my hands. My thoughts raced. I needed to think about what came next. I needed to make sure Alex couldn't find me or do anything else. The first thing I did was change my phone number. Sophie helped me call the carrier and explain the situation. The woman on the other end of the line was understanding and kind, walking me through the process quickly. As soon as my number was updated, I felt a tiny measure of relief. At least Alex couldn't call or text me anymore. Next, I contacted a lawyer. I wanted to be proactive, to make sure I had everything documented in case Alex tried to retaliate. I told her about the strange incidents in the apartment, the injuries I'd sustained, and the steps I had taken to protect myself. She advised me to keep a record of everything, photos, medical reports, text messages, anything that could help if I needed a restraining order or legal action down the line. Sophie had already started snapping photos of the bruises on my leg and the cut on my scalp. She helped me write down a timeline of events, starting from the first suspicious injury. It felt strange and surreal to recount it all. Even as I wrote, part of me still questioned if I was overreacting. But then I remembered the look on Alex's face when he caught me packing, the way he didn't even try to deny it. That was enough to keep me moving forward. After a few days, I started to feel slightly more stable. Sophie's house was a safe haven. She checked on me constantly, bringing tea and snacks, reminding me that I wasn't alone. I still jumped at small noises, a door creaking, a phone ringing, but each passing day without hearing from Alex gave me a little more strength. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification from a friend who still followed Alex on social media. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I wanted to see what he was saying. When I finally looked, my stomach dropped. He had posted a long, rambling message on his profile. He called me unstable, accused me of ruining his life, and implied that I had been the one to sabotage our apartment. It was all there in black and white for everyone to read. Friends we had in common were commenting, some expressing shock, others asking questions. Sophie saw my face and rushed over. "What is it?" I handed her the phone. She read the post, her jaw tightening. "He's trying to gaslight you even now," she said. "But look, some of the comments are on your side. People aren't buying it." She was right. A few of our mutual friends had chimed in, saying the post didn't add up. One even pointed out that Alex's behavior had seemed off for a while. Their support gave me a small boost of confidence. I wasn't the only one who had noticed something was wrong. I took screenshots of the post and the comments, adding them to my growing file of documentation. My lawyer had told me this kind of evidence was crucial. Even though the post upset me, it was more proof of his attempts to manipulate and control the narrative. The next few weeks were a roller coaster. I started therapy to process what I'd been through and to figure out how to move forward. Sophie drove me to appointments, sat in the waiting room, and never let me feel like I was alone. My therapist helped me see that Alex's behavior had been escalating, that I wasn't crazy for feeling unsafe. She reminded me that I had taken the right steps to protect myself and that it was okay to feel scared and angry. As the days turned into weeks, I slowly began to regain a sense of normalcy. I found a new apartment closer to the hospital, a small but cozy place that felt like my own sanctuary. I changed the locks, installed a security system, and made sure only a few trusted people knew where I lived. Alex tried to contact me once more through a mutual friend, but I made it clear that I wanted no further communication. My lawyer sent a formal letter to his attorney, warning him to stop harassing me. After that, the messages stopped. It took time, but I started to feel like myself again. I spent my free moments decorating my new place, hanging up photos, and filling the space with things that made me happy. Sophie came over often, always bringing a bottle of wine and her favorite snacks. She was my rock, reminding me that I had made it through the worst and come out stronger. One evening, as we sat on my new couch watching an old movie, she turned to me and said, "You know, you should be proud of yourself. You saw the signs, you trusted your gut, and you got out. Not everyone can do that." I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. It had been a long, painful journey, but she was right. I had listened to my instincts and found the courage to leave. I had faced the fear and come out on the other side. And for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. After several months had passed, life began to settle into a more comfortable rhythm. My new apartment felt like home, a space where I could breathe freely without fear of traps, sabotage, or manipulations. The scars on my body, bruises, cuts, had faded, but the memories were harder to shake. I found myself hyper-vigilant at first, checking locks and making sure furniture hadn't moved, but over time those habits eased. I could finally relax again, even if some nights I still double-checked everything before going to bed. One day at work, a friend from the hospital approached me in the break room. Her name was Liz, another resident who had started her program around the same time as me. We hadn't been close before, but she had heard bits and pieces about what I'd gone through and offered an open ear if I ever wanted to talk. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. It was one thing to confide in Sophie, but sharing the story with someone else felt like admitting it all over again. But Liz had a calm, understanding way about her. We ended up sitting in the break room long after our shifts had ended, sipping terrible vending machine coffee while I told her everything. How the incident started, the injuries, the screws I found in Alex's drawer, and the final confrontation. Liz listened without interrupting, her face a mix of sympathy and quiet outrage. "Emma," she said when I finished, "you were brave to leave. You trusted your gut, and you did what you had to do." Hearing her say that made something inside me loosen. I had second-guessed myself so many times, wondering if I'd blown things out of proportion, if I'd been paranoid. But Liz's words validated what Sophie and my therapist had been telling me all along. I wasn't crazy. I had been in a dangerous situation, and I had chosen to save myself. As the months turned into a year, I started to feel more like my old self. I still had moments of doubt, times when a loud noise or a certain smell would bring back flashes of anxiety, But those moments became fewer and farther between. I leaned on my support network, Liz, Sophie, my therapist, and found strength in their encouragement eventually. I stopped wondering what Alex was doing or if he was still angry. He was a part of my past now, a chapter I had closed. I didn't look him up online, didn't ask mutual friends about him. I focused on myself, my career, and the relationships that brought me joy and stability. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. Every so often, I think back to that turning point, the moment I found the screws in Alex's drawer, the moment I realized I had to leave. It's a reminder that sometimes our instincts scream at us for a reason. Sometimes the world throws warning signs in our path, begging us to see them for what they are. I'm grateful I listened, even if it took me longer than it should have. And so, life went on. I finished my residency, built new friendships, and eventually started dating again. It took time to open my heart to someone new, but when I did, I found someone who respected my boundaries, who listened and supported me. I learned to trust again, not just others, but myself. My past with Alex became a story I told only when I wanted to help someone else see their own red flags, to remind them that they weren't alone. It had been over a year since I left, and my life had finally settled into something that felt normal. My new apartment was truly mine, decorated in warm, calming tones and filled with small touches of joy. The plants by the window, the stack of well-worn books on the coffee table, and the photo of me and Sophie laughing at some long-forgotten joke. I had built a life that felt safe and steady, and while I still carried the echoes of my past with me, they no longer ruled my thoughts. The fear that used to sit in my chest every night had faded to a distant memory, replaced by something like peace. I had heard bits and pieces about Alex's life since I left. Through mutual friends, I knew that his once pristine reputation at work had begun to crack. Stories emerged about his controlling behavior toward colleagues, about projects that fell apart under his obsessive micromanagement. Eventually, he was let go. No one wanted to work with someone who turned every situation into a battle for dominance. I should have felt some kind of triumph at the news, but mostly, I felt tired. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him ill. But I couldn't feel sorry for him either. He had dug his own hole, and he had to live with the consequences of his choices. It was his burden to bear, not mine. I was finally free of it. As for me, I had learned a lot since the day I walked out of that apartment. The most important lesson was that trust is a fragile thing. Once broken, it's never quite the same. But I also learned that it's possible to rebuild. Not with the same person, perhaps, but with yourself. I rebuilt trust in my own instincts, my own strength, my ability to stand up and say, enough. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's a form of self-respect. And I learned that the people who truly care about you will honor those boundaries, not fight against them. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's that your safety and peace of mind are worth fighting for. No matter how much doubt you feel, no matter how many voices tell you you're being dramatic or unreasonable, listen to the voice inside you that says, this isn't right. That voice is trying to protect you. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If you've had an experience like mine, or if you just want to share your thoughts, please let me know in the comments. Your voice matters. And if you found this story meaningful, consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell so we can continue to build a community of support and understanding. You are not alone, and together we can find strength.